This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Welcome back, Lucha Lushes. This is your special episode. Oh, this is kind of not back to basics, we won't say, but kind of where our bread is buttered, I guess. This is Get to Know the PTBN PWO. And this is just straight up PTBN edition. Nothing, no extra add-ons. Today we have Glenn Butler, Glenny Bunn from the Glenn Butler Hour Spectacular. Glenn, how are you doing today?
I am great. I am glad to be here for my shoot interview.
Yeah, exactly. That's what people have kind of taken to calling it. It's not all that seedy though, and you're not getting paid, so it's not necessarily a.
Yeah, I know that part.
Yeah. Adrian,
yes, sir.
As always, is my co-host. No special co-host, as I said. We're back to. I don't want to. Back to basics sounds bad, but it kind of is. This is the way the show was intended to be.
Yeah.
Right. Just like God intended our country.
Yeah.
Just me and you and a guest who's involved with PTBN. So, Adrian, how are you doing tonight?
Doing good. How are you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. Okay, so we'll start out like we always do with the first question. That's kind of the only two things I have in the show is the opening question and the final question. So, Glenn, are you now or have you ever been a member of the PWO board?
No, I am not. I have looked at the board a handful of times, but I've never been a member. I've never sent an email in or whatever you have to do to actually get a username on there. I come from sort of a different kind of splinter of the wrestling community. I come from the CWO offshoot of Scott Keith's old live journal. That's how deep the rabbit hole goes there.
Wow.
Yeah, and we've talked to people who were involved with that side of things already as well, but I guess get into it a little bit. So you came in. Did you come in after the split already happened, or were you part of the Scott Keith group that then split off?
I was part of the Scott Keith group a little bit. I had a couple of comments, but didn't really get to know anyone, didn't really take part in any longer discussions. I was kind of lurking at the time that the schism took place, and it was it was really like the Reformation. There was bad blood on both sides. There were aspersions being cast everywhere. It was primo internet melodrama. But I really kind of came into my own in the community and kind of meeting people and getting to know people a few months after that happened. And it turned out to be the core of PTBN now. So, hey, that's cool.
Yeah, so you came in, you joined a group. I guess it was initially just like a wrestling, mostly WWF and some older like WCW talk, right, at that time?
Mostly, yeah. There were always some people who followed Japanese wrestling and indie wrestling, but it was mostly WWE and a little like retro reviews of WWF stuff, WCW stuff.
And so you come in, and this group instantly, as you're starting to join and be involved, has this crazy drama schism, and you pick a side and you just go all in on it. You weren't in any way turned off and thought like, oh, maybe I should get out of here when you saw all the drama going down?
No, well, that kind of dovetailed with a particular expression of my obsessions at the time. See, I thought that I should be a little more sociable and maybe talk to people a little more, and the way that I did that was on the internet, and the way that I did that was to comment more on LiveJournal. And I found that the CWO community was a place where I could get into all sorts of discussions with all sorts of people, and I was commenting up a storm, kind of intentionally.
Were did you have, I mean, I guess you would have had to be in the group, but were you like a regular live journaler at the time? Were you kind of keeping tabs on yourself there on the website?
I had my own account. Please, nobody look it up. It's terrible and embarrassing, and the Russians own it now.
Is that it? Huh?
They own a lot of things. You'd be surprised.
Yeah, I guess that is very interesting.
The Russians have owned LiveJournal forever. It was always immensely more popular in Russia than it was in the U.S., and it was pretty popular in the U.S. for a little while.
Really quick,
Yeah,
LiveJournal. I've heard of LiveJournal. I never used it. I never really went on there. Was this something kind of in the heyday of the internet, like in the early 2000s era, or is this like an ongoing thing that's still around? Like how does that work?
The LiveJournal communities have kind of dwindled. In the U.S. at least, it's still going all right in Russia, and the author of A Song of Ice and Fire is still on LiveJournal. He's the only one in the U.S. who's still on LiveJournal.
George R. Martin? Is that who you're referring to?
Yes.
No.
Yes. Thank you.
I thought he still wrote his books out on like an old DOS computer or something. I read that a while ago. I remember.
I'm sure he does, but he writes his blog on LiveJournal.
I didn't know he had a blog. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it kind of came into prominence in the early 2000s during the first blossoming of blogging and online journaling before it was called blogging.
Oh, okay.
And so it got a lot of fandom communities flourished on there. A lot of fanfic communities flourished on there.
Okay.
And so a lot of those things really, really flourished on there. And there were other incidences of great internet melodrama when the people who owned LiveJournal didn't really like the fact that one of the things they were identified with was fanfic, and so they cracked down on it sometimes, and so people made their own fanfiction sites. That's why there's now fanfiction.net and Archive of Our Own, and all of these places where people are free to post their fanfiction without being subject to the vicissitudes of LiveJournal administrators.
Okay, it almost sounds like what Tumblr is now, sort of, right?
A little bit in terms of fandom communities. A lot of those people have sort of migrated over, myself included.
That's cool. Okay, I never knew that. Like I said, I famously saw LiveJournal used in the Facebook movie. That's what Mark Zuckerberg's character types on in that movie. And that's like that's the only famous example I can actually think of. But I've heard of it. But I think, Tim, you mentioned LiveJournal too. You think you had one back in the day, right?
I did. I had a LiveJournal back in the day. And then now that I think about it, didn't LiveJournal have some kind of like llama related, like, God, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess like icon or mascot? Yeah,
Yes.
that was like a llama.
Yeah, it would appear on the error screens and on some of the sort of official LiveJournal staff updates as sort of a jokey joke. Yeah, I remember the llama.
And then Winamp, I remember Winamp had the really bad, like, you're using Winamp.
There's
Winamp.
a name I've not heard in a long time.
And then
I will have you gentlemen know, I still use Winamp every day.
No, you do not.
Do you use Real Player?
That's amazing. But on the Winamp thing that did that, I remember it said it really kicks the llama's ass.
It really whips the llama's ass.
It really whips the llama's ass. What was the obsession in the early 90s on the online community with llamas? Now this just like came to me and I'm like, why was everybody into llamas at that time?
It's a very funny sounding animal, isn't it?
It is.
I guess it is, and they look funny and they spit. I don't know.
Llamas and sloths, to me, are in the same boat as far as weird animals that for some reason exist, but they really shouldn't if you think about it, you know?
Yeah, and llamas had their moment in the early, or sloths had their moment like in the early 2000s.
Yeah. See, we should just do an internet history podcast of how we remember things.
That's kind of what this show is supposed to be.
Yeah, there was a very specific cultural moment for llamas, like there was for sloths, before everyone just settled on cats.
Cats are pretty good. I mean, where do you come down on internet animals, Glenn?
They have a bigger return of investment. That's why cats are still around. I don't know why.
Sure.
Well, as a cat owner myself, or cat partner, I am very firmly on the cat side, even if mine is an asshole.
So you cohabitate with a cat, is what you mean?
I cohabitate with two cats. One of them was brought by my roommate. And that one can't stand to be within 6 feet of me. But the one that I have had in my house as my own for several years sometimes can't stand to be within 6 feet of me. Like I said, he's an asshole. But I love him nonetheless.
Yeah, I think sometimes everybody's got to love an asshole out there too, right?
Yeah,
that's true.
if I wanted something that would always be all upon me and always licking me and everything, I would have gotten a dog.
Right, exactly. So now I'm like wanting to talk about this stuff, but that's That's not the point.
Well, that's how the show goes, isn't it?
Exactly. So when you were doing your live journaling, you come across the CWO, and then live journal kind of falls apart, and the website comes around. You were kind of there from the beginning. How integrated would you say you were? Because I've always, as they talk about the core four, I've always kind of heard you referred to as almost the fifth Beatle of the PWO, or not the PWO, the PTBN.
Indeed. I didn't come around to Place to Be until the beginning of 2014. We're really setting it up in December 2013. I was still on the CWO blog, the old live journal. I was doing my Wednesday walk around the web, which I do at Place to Be Nation exclusively now. For a few months, I did it in both places because there was significant, again, internet drama when Place to Be Nation formed and CWO people went over there. It was a whole hash. But I was doing my Wednesday roundup on the CWO blog for several years before I came over to Place to Be. And the only reason I wound up on Place to Be was basically because of a joke, because the live journal blog was dwindling, fewer people were coming around, fewer people were commenting, and I mentioned offhand in one of the threads about, the dwindling attendance of the blog, I said, hey, I wonder if the Place to Be Nation could use a weekly link roundup. And my good and dear friend, Mr. Steve Willey, who was pretty much at the ground floor of Place to Be, took that seriously and asked Justin, and Justin said, holy shit, that would be awesome. And so I wound up coming on board Place to Be, the first Wednesday walk at first every week starting January 2014, have not missed a week since. And then growing into the podcasts and the other columns that I've tried to do ever since then.
And you haven't looked back ever since, huh? I guess. Just very happy you took the dive into the PTBN. As you have become like more and more integrated. As I said, I've heard people refer to you as kind of the fifth Beatle, the guy in the background who you do a lot of the like, I guess, the back end stuff for the website, correct?
Sometimes, yeah. I do some of the editing and proofreading and kind of futzing around with images when sometimes they're not quite right, and some of the back end editorial stuff on the site, along with Brad and Chad and Justin and all the other people who have a hand in that, and Greenie posting all our stuff on the Facebook groups and all that. But yeah, I kind of made myself useful, I suppose. I came in just to do my column, and then I handled all of the editing and everything for that. And so then when people got busy, because Chad had a baby and Brad had a baby and Justin had another baby, and so people started getting busy and they started asking me to do stuff, and I gradually started doing more and more.
So the Wednesday walk around the web is kind of an interesting, I guess, concept, interesting column, everything that it is, because you're doing like cataloging of, I guess, just would you even say memes, or how would you like describe it if you were describing the article to someone?
It is a weekly link roundup of things that I see around the internet in my various reading that I would do anyway, just for me, that I find interesting or entertaining. Occasionally I'll have something I think is in a more serious way, maybe a little enlightening or reflecting on a serious topic. Not always, though. A lot of it is kind of light with news and notes about things that I find interesting or entertaining.
And that was kind of what I wanted to get to, was, as you said, it was the reading that you would be doing anyway. So have you always been kind of plugged into what's happening on the web? Is that like something that you're really in tune with?
I have always been trying to drink from the fire hose of popular culture. I really liken the internet to that, drinking from the fire hose, because there is so much and it's coming from all directions. And I've always kind of spent a little too much time just futzing around online. And at one point I figured I should do something useful with it. And this was back on the old live journal blog. There was a dearth of threads. for a while we tried to have a daily thread for people just to talk in, and whatever the content was the content. Some people would talk about the content of the post, other people would just talk about whatever wrestling happened that week, because it was primarily a wrestling blog. So one of the things that I did was I sent in a list of links that I had seen, and I just started doing that every week for content and also a little fodder for discussion.
And that, like, is that, as you talk about your, I guess, insatiable appetite for pop culture knowledge, was that something that you had even before the internet early on, do you think? Or did it kind of develop as the access to so much became available?
It really is something that I find balloons with access. First in my life, broadband internet, and the ability to spend so much time kind of taking in so many things. And as social media has grown, and before that, the proliferation of the blogosphere and everything, and RSS feed readers and all of that. In addition to Winamp, I also use an RSS reader every day. So I'm living in the year 2009 just a little bit. There are ways in which I wish I could live in 2009, but that's neither here nor there. And so with all the access to all the information, and as social media is growing, there's just so many more takes and articles and everything flowing in from everywhere. And you do have to limit your media input a little bit, because there's just so much, you'll drown in it. But I try to read a variety of things. I try to keep up on what's going on in the world, even though sometimes I really don't want to. I have been a little bit less. I've been letting myself curtail that input a little bit for the sake of mental health. You have to.
Yeah, that was, as you talk about that, that was probably my next kind of line of reasoning is, how do you stay sane? How often does it feel almost like you're living in a prison of your own design with this article and with this kind of lifestyle that you lead with that?
Well, I write an article for a website I run with my friends. I don't think it's a prison.
Right. It's just, I mean, I know that's a bit much, but you understand what I mean, that there's like an expectation for you to continue to follow so much.
Right. Well, I think if I really needed to, I could cut down a little bit. I don't think anyone would complain. If it really got too serious, I could avoid topics that were distressing. I could avoid topics that were, triggering for some people, if it reached that point. And sometimes I decide, this is too many dour articles. This is too many depressing topics for this week. Let's put in some animal photos.
Which is always good. What's your go-to animal photo, I guess, aggregator, or where do you get the premium cute animal stuff?
Oh, goodness. The Outrage Hiatus Twitter hashtag. Hashtag Outrage Hiatus has cute animal photos of every description. There are cat Twitter feeds you can find. They're practically knocking on your door. There are so many. There are so many ways. You can search anywhere for, funny animal photos or whatever. I actually, for one edition of the Wednesday Walk, when I first started on Place to Be, I decided to try to avoid kind of political content, because I didn't really know the tone of the website. I didn't know all the people on it, other than, the CWO people I knew. And so I kind of wanted to stay, out of that fray a little bit. And the first time that I really, really dived into that was the first week of the Ferguson protests, when I collected just all of these things I was reading, all of these sources about the depravities at the hands of the cops going on during the protests. And I had like a list of links and news and notes about that. And then I literally said, okay, now it's time for cute animals. And I put in a picture of a puppy and a picture of a duck.
That's it.
And I literally used Google image search cute puppy.
So you're doing the legwork.
Well, sort of, sure.
So, you know what? I think we're going to take a break here. We kind of talked about your, I guess, just you in general. We'll just come back and talk a little bit more about maybe backgroundy stuff like that. All right, so we'll be right back.
All right.
Can't wait.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, pro wrestling announcer Kevin Kelly here. I want to make sure you are all subscribed to all the great feeds here at Place to Be Nation. It's really easy to do. Just head to iTunes or your preferred podcatcher app today and search and subscribe to the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, which of course includes the full archives of the Kevin Kelly Show, the Place to Be Nation pod feed, and the Pro Wrestling Only feed. Subscribe, listen, and then rate us and leave feedback today. And be sure to give Justin your true thoughts. I mean, don't hold back. After all, he is kind of a jerk. Just listen to Scott.
Place to Be Nation's JT Rosero here, and I want to let you know that we have a ton of great podcasts available to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlayStation.com, and we now offer them to you on two great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, you can check out Scott Criscolo and me on the Mothership, the Place to Be podcast, with our famous Vintage Vault pay-per-view reviews. PTBN also covers current day wrestling with Clotheslines and Headlines, Main Event, Lucha, Afterground, and our monthly pay-per-view reaction shows. And we relive wrestling's past with our monthly pay-per-view rewind series led by Ben Morse, the Our Vantage Point podcast, which features a potpourri-style look at wrestling history, and Survey Says, a fun look back at the good, bad, and ugly of WCW. And on our very popular Place to Be Nation Pop podcast feed, we offer such great shows as the Glenn Butler podcast, Our Spectacular, Rank and File, PTBN Dadcast, NBA Team, and Lucha Undead, as well as a veritable podcast heaven for comics fans with hard-traveling fanboys, Sellers Points, Todd Weber's Conversations, Geek and Sassy, and the Imaginary Stories. You can find all these current shows plus archives of our past podcasts, including The Kevin Kelly Show, as well by subscribing to both feeds on iTunes. And while there, be sure to rate and leave feedback as well. All these shows, plus others available at PlayStation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus tournaments, and more. Be sure to support our site by using PlayStation.com/Amazon when doing your online shopping, and download our free PTB Vintage Vault Refresh ebooks via the links on our site. We also want to thank our friends at Bonehead's Wing Bar in West Warwick, Rhode Island, and Fall River, Massachusetts, thehistoryofwrestling.com, and Scott Keith's blog of Doom. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr as well. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Okay, we're back. I have to admit, Glenn, Tim told me we're recording with you tonight, so I looked up your Twitter profile and I found you linked to a episode talking about Rogue One, Star Wars Rogue One, and I read the description where you saying that you guys talk about what makes a Star Wars movie and this and that, and it sounds like a really interesting episode. And I can't wait to actually listen to it. But how big of a Star Wars fan are you, and do you also like Star Trek? And if so, which franchise do you like more?
Oh, goodness. If you look at the list of episodes I've done for my podcast, I've probably done about 16 or 17 Star Trek episodes.
Oh, okay.
I did a series during 2016 for the 50th anniversary of Star Trek. I did an episode about each of the movies, and ending with a reaction show that I recorded with my brother the night of the opening of Star Trek 13, and then a mailbag after that. So, I mean, I was a fan of both franchises all my life, really, growing up in the sort of cultural milieu that I was, and with the mother that I did. She was an OG Star Trek fan. She was watching on the night of the premiere of the first episode of the original series, and she stuck with it the rest of her life. She was a diehard sci-fi fan. She was a diehard Star Trek fan from day one, and she, loved Star Wars 2 when it opened and all of that. Thank you very much for the compliment about the episode, by the way.
Oh yeah. No.
Star Wars, I really fell out of contact with around the time of the prequels. I think you'll find is a pretty common story because they were just so bad. Except Star Trek at that time was also getting very bad.
Yeah.
So that kind of stunk for a while, but
I never really saw that era of Star Trek movies. I only knew about it just because like I would read things about the movies and how they weren't that great. But what do you think about the rebooted franchise that J.J. Abrams started? I mean, I love the new movies for what they are. Especially they're not not like the show where it's more introspective and makes you think about a certain theme or topic. They're more like what the Star Wars movies sort of were. So what do you think about the newest movies?
Oh goodness! Oh, you hit on about 5 of things to get my goat right there. Number 1, it's not a reboot.
Okay.
Leonard Nimoy appears as Spock from a time frame after the previous movie. It is not a reboot. It's a story that follows that character to an alternate universe.
Gotcha.
Everyone at home scream nerd right now.
No, you're right. No, you're absolutely right. Though I tend to forget that that's kind of the thing. Is it isn't? You're right. It isn't a reboot, but it's kind of easy to see why it would be. But I get what you're saying. Though.
Well, it's threading a needle.
Yeah.
Basically, I think if they could have rebooted it without risking the ire and just the absolute hatred of every Trekkie in existence, then they would have.
Yeah.
But they had to thread that needle, and they had to do whatever they could for the 2009 movie, Star Trek 11, to do what they wanted to do and move into a new paradigm, but at the same time establish legitimacy. That's why Leonard Nimoy is there. That's why they used so many of the audio little, I don't want to call them Easter eggs, just little bits of audio that are the same as they were on the original series. That's why they got Majel Barrett pretty much on her deathbed to record her last appearance as the computer in that movie.
Oh, okay.
And so there was a definite needle they had to thread there. But for more on that, see my episode about the 2009 Star Trek movie. But I feel that these most recent movies are the first time that the original series has really been on screen, on the big screen, because by the time the original cast got to the movies, it was 10 years after the television show was canceled, and all of the movies, in one way or another, were about how old they were. They're about now Kirk is an admiral, and he's trying to recapture his past glories, and he wants to go where he was in his heyday. And then he has to confront death, and he has a son because he's so old, and his gallivanting around the galaxy had consequences. And then, his friend dies, and he has to confront death again. And Star Trek 4 is a kind of eucatastrophe where you've confronted death and you've transcended death, and now you can have a little bit of joy. Now we're making a comedy. But all of those movies, in one way or another, are about how old they were. And so the sort of bright, flashy, action-based sensibility that the original series had didn't really make it into those movies. Those movies were great. I love each one of them in their own way. But they were doing something very different. And so I think a lot of people bash on the action-oriented base of the newer movies unfairly.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen the first season of the original show, just the first season, and the original show they try to have quite a bit of action in it and stuff. Obviously, it's not.
Absolutely. There's a fist fight at the end of pretty much every episode.
Yeah.
And there's Captain Kirk using the worst wrestling moves in the galaxy. That was one of the Easter eggs I loved in 2009, when one of the Romulans is coming at Kirk and he dumps him off of the big space drill using the galaxy's worst back body drop.
I'll have to rewatch that.
He's a sloppy worker.
Oh yeah, but he gets the job done.
Yeah. No, he certainly does. I really loved Star Trek Beyond. It felt a lot like what the original sort of series had, as far as I don't know, as far as tone and theme and stuff like that. And it's
Oh,
funny because
yeah,
it was
it was-
advertised
it was-
as like a big action movie, and it was, but it also, had an old school feel to it,
Yeah, I think there was enough heart to it to escape being condemned as just a mindless action movie.
Yeah.
Just enough heart to escape that, but enough. As opposed, I think, to the next-gen movies, which kind of descended into dull action thrillers.
Yeah, that's great. And since we're on the topic of sci-fi, and Tim, I hope you don't mind me going on about sci-fi, but have you seen Arrival, and what did you think about it, if you have?
I actually haven't seen that yet. I have not made enough time to see enough movies in recent years.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. It's a really good movie. It's not a big action-packed movie at all, but it's sort of like the anti-Independence Day type of sci-fi alien movie, which I think you would appreciate. I think a lot of people would appreciate. So
awesome.
Yeah. Well, that was my yeah. There we go.
Okay. Well, so you mentioned it there, and with it having just been Mother's Day, you talked about how you couldn't have gotten out of your house with your mom without being into sci-fi at least somewhat. Let's talk about, I guess, that background a little bit, because I think you haven't. I mean, you do a podcast with your brother, and you would expect a little bit more familiar talk there, but sometimes you guys really get so deep in the content of what you're talking about that I think it almost doesn't, like, you couldn't have the conversation with anybody but someone who's as close to you as a brother, but it's almost like at that point you guys are talking so much about a topic that it doesn't matter that you're brothers. If that makes sense?
That is exactly why I decided to do the podcast with my brother. That's the only reason I have my own podcast, is because I wanted to try to capture some of the conversations that I have with him, because I feel like if we established enough of a context that another person could possibly ever understand our deep internecine series, our complex web of in-jokes, then I think my kind of person would really, really, really love that.
Right. So it's quite charming, and I love the show, and I listened to probably all of the Star Trek episodes. As someone who doesn't even watch Star Trek or any sci-fi stuff, I just really enjoyed you guys back and forth. And for me, the pedantic making the differentiation between it being a reboot or not is right up my alley. So I'm into that as well.
Hey Tim, I'm proud of you.
I
You watched Rogue One. That for you is like huge.
I would have to. I think I watched one of them. I don't know which one.
You watched Rogue One. We
the
talked
one where they
about
die
it
on the beach at the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Spoiler
Almost
alert.
all of them, right? But let's take it back and let's talk about that background. So your mom kind of influenced you guys being into sci-fi. Was she a big fan?
Yes, she was a big fan pretty much her whole life. Growing up in the 50s and 60s, she would watch any sci-fi that she could, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, into the Star Trek era. All of that was her bread and butter.
Twilight Zone is awesome, by the way. Just
yes,
had to say that.
Yes. My mom was really a lot more influential, in terms of media fandom than my dad ever was. I'm not sure that my dad was ever a fan of much of anything. I struggle to think of a TV show that he really loved outside of This Old House, which I love thanks to him, but still, it's a different kind of fandom,
Yeah.
And so my mom, being such a strong sci-fi fan, really imparted that on me and my brother. If only because those were the VHS tapes that we had growing up. She would record, whatever it was that she liked. She had this massive collection of videotapes, and a lot of the things that I had to choose from when I wanted to sit down and watch something as a kid were the Star Trek movies, the Star Wars movies, Back to the Future.
Love that franchise.
Yes, Close Encounters, all of these, a lot of sci-fi movies that she had recorded.
And you were, as you said, they were on the VHS. She had recorded them. Would you watch them with her, or were you kind of discovering it on your own?
Sometimes I would watch it with her when there was something new. We would go see it together. But as a small kid, I was mostly on my own doing that.
And did you find, like, It's like this is a weird question probably to even answer, but did you find that part of it was, like you said, it's available. Part of it was you knew that your mom liked it and it was something that like you could relate to her with. Do you think you would have chosen the sci-fi and all of that if it wasn't what was there and also something that you knew that now you kind of had in common with your mom?
It wasn't really that much of a conscious choice as in terms of I need to have something in common with my family. It was more that it was kind of ambient. It was in the air. It was what she and my brother would talk about at the dinner table. It was what my brother would spend a lot of time doing, and sometimes I would hang around him because he's a few years older than me, and when you're little, that's very important. And so it was what people were doing.
Okay, and so, I mean, do you think that someone, like, if it was you and you just were completely against it, like, do you think you could have survived growing up in your household if you just were not a fan of the sci-fi at all?
Oh, I could have. I just, there would have been a lot more conversations I wouldn't have been able to take part in.
Do you, I don't know, I mean, like, so the media, you say the media consumption kind of came through from your mother's side. Do you think that there's other parts of your personality that kind of came through because of her as well?
That's interesting. There's certain personality elements. I wish I'd gotten a little more of her temperament, but that's neither here nor there. And certain ways of relating to people, certain turns of speech, and anything that happens when you spend that much time over that formative a period of your life with a person, it's the sort of family subculture that you're immersed in,
Right. No, I mean, there's no way for it not to be. But I guess you mentioned your father a little bit in passing, but I mean, I'll just say, like, he was around, he was there for your entire childhood, correct?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, and so relationship with dad was fine. He was just more maybe the other side, not so much into the sci-fi, but I don't know, whatever.
No, he wasn't really. There weren't really TV shows or movies that he really dived into like that. He would accuse us of overanalyzing everything fairly often.
Has he been on the internet at all?
No, he was never on the internet, and has died long before I had a podcast.
Damn.
And both of my parents have died actually.
Sorry to hear
by
that.
now. Thanks. But yeah, well, Dad was a little more standoffish, not that sociable, didn't get out much. Kind of a surly guy.
Okay. Well, what do you think brought him joy? What was his favorite pastimes, would you say?
Well, he was a carpenter by trade, and he did that professionally, well, not as a pastime, for about 40 years, and he loved it. He loved building things. He loved having, physical objects that could be used, or houses that came from his hands. That really gave him joy for a very long time, and it cannot be understated how much he loved my mom. I mean, I think she was legit like the only person he had eyes for in his life. And so, that was really what kind of brought him together. But there were other sorts of chronic pain issues and chronic fatigue issues, and good Lord, if we could have gotten that guy on some antidepressants, it might have been nice. But there were other sorts of issues as well.
Okay, and I mean, I guess, do you think that his, I don't know, the carpentry, working with the hands and having something to show, did any of that kind of come through to you? Do you put a value on any of that?
I have a certain pride whenever I manage to commit minor act of carpentry, mostly because whatever I do manage to do is because I saw him do it once. He very intentionally did not teach me or my brother how to do anything with regard to that, because his mentality was he spent decades doing something he loved to do, true, but he broke his back doing it, and his knees, and his wrists, and his hands. He had extremely bad arthritis everywhere. He had, like I said, chronic pain issues. And his mentality was he did that for years and broke his body so that we didn't have to. And he wanted very much for my brother and I to get comfortable office jobs and not, do physical labor like he did. So he intentionally didn't show us any of that because he didn't want us to love it.
Okay. So you kind of, as you said, you take pride when you are able to pull something off, and maybe even would have the same sense, but it just kind of wasn't fostered, or you were almost even taught to go the other way. And obviously you ended up and you enjoy it. But I think you mentioned something there, and it's probably the most important thing is, like, do you think that you kind of were modeled on how a romantic relationship should be in some ways from your parents? As you said, your dad loved your mom so much.
He really did. And I mean, that's problematic. I it feels weird to say, but I really think that he enjoyed himself most in their relationship when my mom was sick a lot when I was a kid. She was having surgery all the time. Like, we were always going to see her in the hospital. There was one time she had major abdominal surgery and she was stuck in bed for almost a year. And my dad kind of took over a lot of the things around the house. And I think that at the time that his arthritis and his pain got so bad that he had to stop working as a carpenter, I think that sort of gave him new meaning, to be needed, and to be able to fulfill the needs that there were. And then later on, when I was in college, my mom had a car accident and tore her rotator cuff, and he was almost buzzing for a couple of months while she couldn't move her arm at all, and he was getting everything for her and helping her dress and everything. And you could tell that suddenly he was needed so much more, and he was there for it. So that kind of modeling for a relationship isn't something that I think I've taken, but the sort of more understated kind of background level affection of a relationship is something that I do try to model.
Yeah, well, I hate to say it, and obviously I'm not talking ill of anyone here, but it's probably for the best, because not to say that there was any issues there, but I don't know, that level of really finding, I guess, happiness in feeling like you're fulfilling things for people is like the best way that you can feel good about it. Well, it didn't reach the level of like a Munchausen's by proxy. So right, okay, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to cast aspersions and say something. No, I know. But it can get to a point where it is a bit obsessive. It doesn't sound like it was, because it's not a bad thing to want to do nice things for people and almost to be energized by it. You don't feel like you really have any of that, though, like in yourself personally? Well, or maybe just not in a romantic setting. I like to think that I'm a good, solid person to have around in your life. That, when needed, I can be depended on. And I think there are events that have happened lately with my boyfriend in very tense situations where I like to think I've come through on that. To the extent that my dad did sometimes, not really. I mean, the one
the one thing that I think typifies the lengths that he would go to are that my mom had really bad diverticulitis, much like Brock Lesnar, and she could not eat anything with a seed or a skin, and she had dietary restrictions along those lines. And one of the things that my dad would do is he would peel onions for her. Have you ever peeled an onion?
Yes.
Yeah.
Onions have a thin skin between each layer of the onion. So he would sit down at the kitchen table and cut an onion in half and separate each and every layer and take off each and every piece of skin between each and every layer of that onion, so that he could cook something my mom really liked. And so I mentioned that once to someone I was a woman I was dating like 10 years ago, and I think she mentioned that again to me when my dad died, that's something that stayed with her in terms of the lengths you go to for someone you love sometimes. Just the sort of like drudge work that you do just to make them happy.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is intense, and as you talked about, that there was almost a buzzing at different times based around being like supportive. Like, as you say that you like to feel like you're a stand-up person or the kind of person that people can depend on, but do you feel like you get a similar almost buzz or like a kind of an energy burst from being the person that's dependable, the person that people can count on?
I think you see there's a happy medium there. I like to be needed in situations where I know I can come through. In situations where I'm not sure of that, it is extremely, extremely anxiety-ridden. And there are all sorts of issues that bubble up with that, you know, a sense of inadequacy and a sense of failure and guilt and shame and all of that.
Yeah, I can really relate. I mean, in a lot of that, it's so when I was young, I had essentially an ulcer from stress as a child. So from worrying and just from stressing myself out about nothing, and I can do the same thing where if I don't feel like I'm doing everything perfect, like I can be a bit of an insane person when it comes to it, and it causes this great stress to where I totally get you, where knowing like, oh, this is just something I can handle, I really enjoy that, but then when it goes beyond it, it's kind of tough. And it does, I feel like a lot of, I don't know, a big part of you, as someone who knows you very superficially, seems to be a kind of push and pull with how much interaction and how much you kind of are a social person who doesn't necessarily want to always be social, if that makes sense. As you talk about like the live journal thing being a way for you to interact more with people, but doing it online within a community that's almost like splintering and fractioning apart. Does that seem right? Like, do you find yourself really enjoying social settings, but also like it being very important to you to be in control of how long they go?
I very much need to have a sort of control. The live journal group was more in terms of I can sort of enter this room and I can comment on things and talk with people, but there isn't an expectation that a conversation is going to be immediate. It's a sort of staggered conversation. Someone leaves a comment and someone might respond to it 2 hours later, and then you might respond again the next morning if you're busy or time zones didn't line up and you went to sleep or whatever. There isn't an expectation of immediate response. In an instant message situation, that's a little different because people know that you saw the message and you have to think of something to say. And I am very bad at thinking of something to say immediately. And so I tend to default to situations or to feel more comfortable in situations where that's not necessarily an expectation. It used to be in comment threads, but those have kind of dwindled. I do it a little more on Twitter, where I'm mostly retweeting things and every now and then responding to something, because, again, there isn't that expectation that you're going to be able to say the next thing immediately.
Right. So...
Did I not answer the question?
No, you did.
I'm
You
sorry.
completely did. No, you did. So part of the push and pull, I guess, of the dynamic, I think also is it's so, God, there's these words that are like so, I guess, just loaded and they feel weird, but then at the same time, it's like the words just mean what they mean.
Wanting to be social, but not wanting to be social. I remember more of what you asked now. Excuse me. That's one reason why I tend to filter into this whole podcast scene a little slowly, because I like to feel like I know someone a little bit, and listening to their podcast is certainly helpful for that. I've listened to this podcast many times.
Thank you for that, by the way.
But still, I mean, since we're kind of in like tangential communities a little bit, I tend to feel a lot more unsure of myself than I do when I'm on with someone I've known for a long time, someone I know very well, or on my own show with my brother, which is kind of the extreme end of that spectrum. So there's a certain sort of discomfort in any situation where I feel not that I'm not in control, but more that I don't entirely know what the landscape is.
Yeah, and obviously there's nothing wrong with that.
That's just garden variety social anxiety.
Yeah, exactly. That's run-of-the-mill stuff. No, but I guess the other part of it, I was going to say, or what I was kind of like thinking, is like part of the whole thing is, I don't want to say obsession because that sounds weird and that's not the word that I mean necessarily, but compulsion can also sound just as bad. Like, language is weird in that way, right?
Yes.
Kind of your affinity, let's say, for pop culture feels like it in some ways informs or goes hand in hand with it, because it's like, do you sometimes feel that you almost substitute, or not substitute, but what would be the word I'm looking for? I don't know, just like add to, I guess. There's better words for that, but I don't have them at the end of my tongue at the moment. You add to your interactions with people by indulging in social media, indulging in pop culture, and almost get a substitute for interaction with a person.
Yes, I think that's fair. In addition, I'm always cracking stupid jokes and making various pop culture references just to create a sense of commonality or a sense of community in a very, very slight way, by referencing something that the person I'm talking to is going to know. That creates a very, very short form of sociality, some sort of commonality, I mean, where I don't really know how to do that without stupid jokes and pop culture references.
I don't think there's another way. Like, as you were saying that, I'm like, how else do people have conversations with people they don't know, right? Because I was going to ask you, the next thing is, like, do you feel that you kind of get into all of these little niche fandoms? And I mean, I know that I can talk to you about so many different things because you're one of the people that I know, like, follows a lot of the Maximum Fun podcasts and like the McElroy Brothers stuff. Like, we've like talked back and forth about that. And then also
totally.
Take My Wife, Please. We're talking about that. Like, oh yeah, Rhea Butcher and on CISO and
friends of the show,
comedy stuff, and just like wrestling stuff and sci-fi. Do you find that part of the reason why you kind of have an insatiable appetite for all of that as well is like icebreakers, as you just talked about, making pop culture references and jokes, like ways to feel like, oh, this is how you talk to people, is you talk to them about these things, and that's why you want to know so much about them?
There's an icebreaker element to it. There's somewhat of a preemptive icebreaker element too. When I first came to Place to Be, I had stopped watching wrestling. In like I was only watching WWE before, but I had stopped watching in like mid 2012, and then I came in at the beginning of 2014 because I hadn't watched pretty much any WWE. In 2013, I watched the Royal Rumble, and they set up another fucking Rock title match, and I decided they're not doing it to me again, and I, peaced out. But that was a whole thing for me in 2012. Good fucking Lord. And then I came back in 2014. I joined Place to Be, and pretty soon after that, Steve asked me to join the High Spot written column, a wrestling news and notes column that we did for a while. It was very fun to do because I love Steve, and going to do all the stuff with him was great. But I was not watching wrestling at the time, so it was wrestling news written by a guy who didn't watch wrestling, which I thought was great. and
yeah, that is pretty.
And then I started again when the network premiered a month before WrestleMania, because I figured I'm part of the Place to Be now. I'm in all these chats and the website with all these people. I ought to have a common frame of reference with them. And so I started watching again. And then there are other things that I branch out and watch because of recommendations from people and discussions that I see happening that I don't want to be a total outsider to. And so there's obviously a social aspect to pretty much everything that you do, in that often on the internet, you're sharing all of your fandoms with people. A lot of these things are not as private as they used to be. And that can be a great thing because it's creating communities among what used to be, insidery niche interests. And so that element kind of brings me along to more things than I, decide I'm interested in this. I'm going to find a community. Sometimes it's been I've wound up in a community. Is there anything I'm interested in here?
Right. So it's kind of more of a counter strike to these are the people that I like. I'm going to kind of get into the stuff that they're into as well, right? Does that kind of, I guess, what you mean by that?
To the extent that something really grabs me, to the extent that I know that my tastes, maybe align with someone, or my tastes are orthogonal to someone's, and so I can make judgments that way. There are all sorts of ways that you kind of navigate this sort of media landscape.
Right. You, as you talk about that and liking to be there for people, I find that you're on a lot of the PTBN podcasts that are like panels. You're kind of the go-to fill-in for clotheslines and headlines. Is a lot of that last minute? We know Glenn will come through and do this, and again, it makes you feel good because you're able to come through and help out when they were looking for another person, another voice? Or how much of it do you actually really enjoy being on the podcasts?
Oh, I enjoy it. I enjoy the podcasts that I do a lot more while I'm doing them than I do anticipating them. Do you experience this sort of thing where anytime you make an appointment or you say you're going to hang out with someone or you're going to go do something at a certain time, as soon as you kind of set that in your calendar, you immediately don't want to do it?
I can.
I do. I immediately start getting anxious. My heart rate starts going up. I start thinking, oh well, I really don't feel like it. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I really have anything to talk about. And then we get on the show and it's fine. And it's great. And it's gabbing with my pals. With Steve and Justin and Nate on Clotheslines and Headlines and all the other guests we've had on. It's great. But I get so anxious about it every time. And then it's just spending a night talking to my friends again.
Right. It just is what you've done it a bunch of times at this point, but you
Yeah.
get anxiety from it still.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the first couple times were more spur of the moment. Justin couldn't make it, or someone else couldn't make it. And now it's become a little more regular, like, you know, once a month or every other month or so, you know, Glenn and Steve are going to do the Chikara segment, or, you know, Lucha Underground's coming back. We're probably going to start doing segments on that again. You know, sort of regular slots that you fit into.
Right. Okay. Well, I feel like we've essentially talked for almost an hour, which is the prerequisite for when the show is supposed to end. I feel like we've talked, and I feel like this is a good stopping point, as we could probably continue going for quite a while now. So we'll take one more quick break, and then we'll come back for the final question.
The Pro Wrestling Only Podcast Network. Subscribe on iTunes or on Android with your favorite podcast app. Established in 2013, the Pro Wrestling Only Podcast Network is committed to providing unique takes on the rich and diverse medium of professional wrestling, focusing on its history and global impact, but also exploring the vibrant contemporary scene. The roll call includes Space City, an NWA on-demand podcast, This Week in Wrestling, Stacey and Elliott's Bogus Journey, the Super Apuestas podcast, the Military Industrial Suplex, Strong Style History, Puro Paris, and Psychology is Dead. Also, from the archives, the full catalog of great shows that provided a fresh look at classic wrestling, including Where the Big Boys Play, Titans of Wrestling, Tag Teams Back Again, Letters from Kayfabe, Wrestling Culture, Pro Wrestling Super Show, Goodwill Wrestling, and many, many others. The Pro Wrestling Only Podcast Network. Only the best.
All right, so we're back, and if you didn't notice, that second break was much shorter than the first one. I know it's quite unprofessional of the network here, but Glenn, before we let you go, I think everybody knows it's time for one last thing. Adrian, what is that?
It's time for the final... Oh, shit. Hold on. All right, retake. It's time for the final question.
The final question, yes, Glenn. So someone who only knows you from the Wednesday Walk Around the Web or the Glenn Butler Hour podcast Spectacular, or maybe the Round Robin podcast, or the this is one from the vaults, the Pro Wrestling Super, or what was it, the Extreme Super Show? Damn, I can't remember it.
Some episodes of the Pro Wrestling Super Show, followed by the Super Extreme Vault on indefinite hiatus.
There it is. That's what it is. The Super Extreme Vault. I remember that well. What would be something that they would find surprising or shocking to know about Glenn Butler, the man behind the voice, behind the, I guess, aggregator of links?
Oh, goodness. I'm not sure about shocking or surprising, but at the end of every podcast, I give my Twitter, Tumblr username Glenny Bun, and people call me that. I know Scott Criscola likes to call me that all the time. And I'm not sure that I ever explained the origin of that name on any of these shows.
I don't know, so I'm excited to find out.
That actually comes from high school theater. When I was a junior, we were doing South Pacific, and there's a song in South Pacific, Honey Bun. And at the last cast party, one of the seniors that year and I did a parody version of Honey Bun talking about Glenny Bun. The reason I'm a little ambivalent about it now in my current state of development is that parody song was basically an extended series of fat jokes.
Oh.
The song from South Pacific goes 101 pounds of fun. That's my little honey bun. Get a load of honey bun tonight. We changed it to 301 pounds of fun, etc., etc., etc. It went on from there. There was a gag about cellulite in the second line.
Oh, jeez.
So that was something I enjoyed a whole lot more in high school than I do as an adult. It's now something that I'm deeply, deeply ambivalent about, but a good nickname sticks. and it stuck with a lot of people, and I used it as my Talking about old technologies, my AOL Instant Messenger screen name.
Oh, wow.
And an older technology which I was using up to about a couple of months ago, actually.
Oh, nice.
Because it was the one way that I kept in touch with my brother in my base. Yes, sure. Until finally AOL killed third-party programs using the AIM protocol, and I finally got my brother on Skype. Not on Skype, on Slack. So yeah, that is something that kind of checks in at a certain point in my development and a certain point in my ideology, but it's a catchy nickname, so it sort of stuck. So it's not like I'm going to change it now.
Well, I'm happy that I didn't ask you because I had always wondered. Thought it was a cute nickname, didn't know where it came from, and then now I'm super happy that I found out, and it served as a perfect answer for the final question. So I think we are all set. Adrian, is there anything you want us to close out? Anything you want to say before we go?
No, just follow me at Dilla Boots. Follow us at Lucha Undead, and that's pretty much it. Tim, what do you have?
Same old. Glenn, is there anything you need to plug before we let you go?
The latest episodes of Clotheslines and Headlines, I was on with the lugubrious Steve Willie. We did our regular Chikara segment, and I will probably be back on there soon. I will try to get new episodes of the Glenn Butler podcast, Hour Spectacular, which is how you say the name of the show. I don't know when that will happen because it's tied to my vicissitudes and various anxieties. So whoops-a-doodle.
Which we already were talking about. Everyone needs to cut you some slack now on when the podcast comes out because they know what's going on inside your head that's keeping the podcast from coming out.
Oh, people aren't bothering me about it. I'm bothering me about it. But in the meantime, you can find the Wednesday Walk Around the Web, a weekly link roundup, every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. sharp at placetobenation.com.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, that's it, I guess. But before we go... Yes, the most important things in the world, in life, are the 3 Bs, which are tonight are good buns, Glenny buns, good buds, and good banter. Good night, everybody.